All right, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Monday Night Recap Show from TriStateFootball.com. I am your host slash, co-host slash reporter, Daniel Kuhn, and along with me is the always consistent and wonderful Jacob Berkemeyer.
Thank
And
you.
we're going to be here tonight to talk everything. It was week 7, correct?
Yes, it
Yes.
was.
All right. Week 7. Everything week 7. Making sure, like I do every week, making sure I got that right because it's crazy that we're already on the week 8
Yeah, it is.
in the season. It's moving fast. And we've got some games, good games to talk about from over the past weekend. We're going to talk a little bit about the conference standings and then little bit of a week 8 preview. We will attempt to keep it under an hour again here this evening as we got a little long winded last weekend. But
We did.
Jacob and I just got all of our feelings out about the Bengals, so we may be quicker than normal. So, without further ado, I will kick it straight to Jacob, and he's going to give us his rundown of excuse me of Lakota East and Colerain, which actually ended up being a good game.
Yeah. So really surprising score for me. Like I was Colerain's obviously struggled all year this year. Lakota East ended up winning 36-31. But Colerain putting up 31 points this week, that's different than what they've done all year. Their scores, West beat them 52-0 the week before, 14-7 against Sycamore. So they really found something with their offense, and hopefully this is something that Colerain can kind of build upon the last 3 weeks of the year, because just to get a win on the board for them. But definitely a big win for East. That would have been a really tough loss if they slid and dropped that one to Colerain with the season that they've been having. They've had a tremendous turnaround this year with the leadership of John Kitna and Jameson Kitna. But to get into the stats a little bit, Jameson completed 15 passes on 33 attempts, had 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ryder Hooks, he's been awesome all year for East. He missed the first game of the year. Since then, been a great asset to them. He had 20 rushes, 195 yards for 1 touchdown. And the long was only 33, so he was just churning out consistent 10-yard runs. So really good day on the ground for Ryder Hooks. And then the passing attack was very even, a very even distribution. Christopher Boyer paced the team with 4 catches for 34 yards, but Zion Neal was the one who had the big play to get loose for East. 3 catches, 69 yards, and a touchdown. But moving on to the Colerain side, want to talk about Sean Billups. He completed 12 out of his 18 passes for 1 touchdown and a pick, but also contributed 12 attempts for 108 rushing yards. So nice little dual threat day for him. But really, Hayden Danielson is the surprise here. He had 14 carries for 164 yards and 3 touchdowns. So if you're Colerain, I would be looking to get the ball in Hayden Danielson's hands a little bit more. Seems like he can make some explosive plays for that offense, which they've been lacking a lot of the year. So really wanted to just dive into this because this was a game we all looked at, I think, at the start of the week, like, East will do what West did to Colerain the week before. And I think Colerain might have took that West loss a little personally, getting blown out that much. And they really came to compete this game. And, you got to hang if you're Lakota East too, you just got to be happy you snuck out of here with a win. I mean, you didn't play your best ball. Colerain clearly threw some punches as they were leading going into halftime, and then East responded with 14 in the third, so to kind of get back the lead and take over. So big win for Lakota East. And then if you're a Colerain Cardinals fan, you're at least feeling a little bit better about these last 3 weeks of the season versus the first 7. So would you have any thoughts on that game?
So I will say I saw it briefly on Twitter or X. I guess it's called these days. I'll forever call it Twitter.
Same.
But I saw on X that there was at the end of the game, Coleraine kicked an onside or something like that, and it ended up getting called back. I believe that was what I saw correctly. Maybe I'm wrong.
I didn't. You probably have a better idea. I didn't see any.
I thought I saw something on X like that, and
Yeah.
maybe I should have. Let me see if I can't maybe pull something up while I'm talking about it. But it's like, if you're
Was it an illegal touching?
possibly, yes.
Like that might have been what, if there was a flag thrown, they might have recovered it just a little too early.
Well, my point was is that even if that is the case, and Coleraine ended up coming short on an unfortunate play and call like that, then you got to hang your hat on. Hey, we've had a rough season this year, but we went out there and we hung with one of the big dogs in the GMC this year. And really, even though it'll come up as a loss on the record for the season, that's something you can build momentum off of for Coleraine going through to the rest of the season. I mean, you may not be in contention for the playoffs, but if you can rack off, if you take a couple wins, get a couple wins under your belt here towards the end of the year, you can build momentum into the next year, into the off-season program. So it's a good place for Coleraine to start, during what's been a really tough year.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, the fact that they only lost by 5 to one of the best teams of the GMC this year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an impressive accomplishment, especially for a team that hasn't had much success. So,
Absolutely.
and to back up with what you were saying is it you have to remind me of his name.
Let me get back to it.
For Coleraine, the guy who had a lot
the
of
running back, Hayden Danielson.
Hayden Danielson. There it is. You get the ball in his hands way more often going forward because if you can get him producing that kind of game.
Okay, so this makes a lot more sense. So I just clicked on Hayden's stats for the year.
Mm-hmm.
He recorded no rushing yards through all the previous games. So
must have been hurt.
Most likely, well, I don't know, because he recorded defensive stats for a lot.
So maybe they just hadn't
So
been.
I'm wondering. I think they might have just switched.
Is he a senior?
I think so. Yes.
No, that's unfortunate. But you know what? Even still, I mean, you found something, right? When you're in that type of position, 0-7, 0-6, up to that point on the season, you're looking for anything that you can do to right the ship, and it seems like they've got something they may be able to work with.
Yeah. So he is a senior, so he is a senior. I just fact checked myself to make sure. But yeah, I mean, give credit to the coaching staff because they obviously took a risk with that decision, moving him to running back and playing him both ways, but it paid off. You get a little bit more explosive on offense. Like we talked about, hopefully they can win the next couple games or win a couple down the stretch and build some positive momentum for next year. Absolutely. But so now I will kick it back to you for your game of the week. And that one
we're going to keep it in the GMC for the first few games here, just because there's some quite a few good contests in the GMC this week. But the squirrel sheet may not have the same kind of firepower as the other game that Jacob just talked about. But I mean, the game between Mason and Middletown, was a good game, and I'm not going to give Google any more advertising than they already have. So I'm going to hit the skip button on that, play the video in the background. But yeah, I mean, oh boy, hold on, wrong button. Oh gosh, what happened to it? Oh gosh, people, I'm sorry. Oh, I know what I did. All right, so we're going to try this again. We're just going to do that. There we go. So ignore the technical difficulties we just had. For me, I know it's been a couple of weeks, so we probably should get that down by now, but technology wants to do what technology wants to do. Anywho, back to what I was saying is, the game score ended up being 17-14, and, Middletown came into this game with a lot of momentum. And Mason, we had talked about it last week when we talked about their game. had kind of had it up in like a pretty down season up to that point, and had
Mhm.
been looking for the get right game to come out with a win and kind of get back on track. And they found that last week. And like I talked about last week, carrying momentum into the next couple of weeks, they carried more momentum into this game, and now it's just going to continue to. I almost knocked my mic over. It's going to continue to keep building for Mason. This game came down to the wire. It was a nail biter. Mason kind of came back from a little bit of a deficit. I mean, actually, quite a big deficit at with 2:55 left in the second quarter. Middletown's Jeremiah Landers hit a 33-yard run to put them up 2 scores. You had 14-13 at that point going into halftime. And then it wasn't until the second half where Mason scored, 14 unanswered and came out with this win. The last touchdown of the game, Mason's last touchdown was with 7 seconds left. So almost literally at the buzzer to win this game.
Yeah.
So talk about momentum building for Mason. I mean, to come out on top of a team that's had maybe a little bit of a better season than you and win it that way is very good and very big for them to be able to continue on this track of getting better and maybe putting themselves in a position to make a playoff push here as we get towards the end of this and the thicket. We're really what does Scott Hansen always say? It's the witching hour.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of the witching hour for Cincinnati High School and the tri-state, in terms of the football season, because we're getting down to it now. And if you want to get in the playoffs, you got to stake your case now. And Mason's putting themselves on the map, pulling out big wins to write their season and put themselves in a position to be playing in the postseason. And as I sit here and talk about, I'm going to throw in some stats here. All in all, like I talk about a game of the week contender. Like I said, the scoreline maybe necessarily wasn't eye popping, but I mean total yards, Mason had 217 to Middletown's 208. So you're talking about a very evenly matched game.
Mhm.
Middletown did struggle, with some discipline issues. They had 11 penalties for 120 yards. That's typically not going to give you that winning recipe you're looking for. I mean, Mason only had 6 for 50. That's just a stat that popped out in my head.
Yeah.
And then you look at Mason's efficiency on third and fourth down. Apparently, Mason loves playing fourth down football because they went 2 for 10 on third down, but they went 3 for 5 from fourth. So they were pulling out the clutch gene a lot on Friday night to get back into this game and eventually end up winning it. I mean, Mason and Middletown, they only combined for 171 yards passing, but they both combined for over, it looks like 250 yards rushing. So a little bit of a ground and pound game. Mason did outgain Middletown on the ground, 151 to 103, but Middletown had the advantage passing. That shows up in the passing statistics. Jeremiah Landers for Middletown went 8 for 19 for 105 and a touchdown. Ashton Schaaf, I think that's how you say his name. We went through this last week.
Yeah.
Schaaf, he went 9 for 18 for 66 and had a touchdown, but he also had an interception. But then you get down to that, rushing statistics, and it's all quarterbacks. The quarterbacks were the key players of the game, but not with their arms. Mm-hmm. Jeremiah Landers had a good game passing, but he also had 63 yards rushing. And he also had a touchdown rushing as well. Ashton Schaaf maybe didn't have the game through the air he was looking for, but on the ground he ended up with 19 attempts for 86 yards. Mm-hmm. So, even when the passing game's not working out, the quarterbacks are still putting the teams on their back and taking it to the defense. And credit to Ashton Schaaf. I mean, if you're struggling to find success through the air, and even success through your tailbacks, he picked it up and he did what he had to do to get the win. Temi Adesanyana, right? Yeah, Adesanyana. He had 15 for 43 yards and a touchdown. So he had a touchdown, so not a terrible game for him, but his average was only 2.9. So this game boiled down to the quarterback play, and not the quarterback play in the way you'd think. It was coming on the ground, not through the air. And Ashton Schaaf was able to take his team, and they ended up coming out on top. I will look through here if I see anything more. Ethan Jordan for Mason had 3 catches, 29 yards, and a touchdown. Maximilian Johnson for Middletown had 4 for 67 and a touchdown. That's an average of 16.8 yards, receiving. So a good game for him. Mm-hmm. Looking through the rest of this stuff, there was Maximilian Johnson also had a 57-yard kick return. Didn't go for a touchdown, but still pretty solid.
Yeah.
Pretty solid day. I mean, that's a pretty solid pretty solid effort. looking through defensive statistics, looks like Middletown actually came out in the positive side of the turnover battle, forced 2 fumbles, and also had an interception, whereas it doesn't look like Mason had any turnovers. So, all things considered, a really, impressive comeback win.
It sounds like a ugly win, but a
Mhm.
good win for Mason.
Well, yeah, like
You're not playing your best football if you're turning the ball over, scoring 3 points in the first half, and then you're able to come back and just keep fighting, converting fourth downs when you're down
Mhm.
2 scores.
It's like you
Get back.
always.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
no, you're good. I was just gonna say I was just finishing with get back in the game, and that's what
Mhm.
they were able to do. And then
Well,
once you're back in it, you make it a game. So
like I said, they came out at halftime and scored 14 unanswered to win this game. And, judging from the score line from halftime compared to the end of the game, listen, you may be down 14-3 at halftime, but that 3 points could be important. And that's what happened here. All they
yeah,
had to do is score 2 touchdowns and get this win. And everyone talks all the time about halftime adjustments, but it's very real. I always thought growing up playing football, halftime's a whole new game. you
yeah,
know, you're coming back out of the locker room, everyone's feeling fresh and ready to go, and it's up to you to respond the way you need to, depending on the situation of the game. And Mason had the right response.
for sure.
So, like I talked about at the beginning, Jacob made a good point. Ugly win, but a good win. You'll take those if you're Mason. Middletown can regroup and put themselves maybe on the right track going to their next game.
Yeah,
And Jacob will talk more about that at the end with the conference stuff. But all things considered, like I said, Mason building wins, building momentum, put themselves in a good position going into the back half of the final few games of the season.
yeah. I think especially if you're Middletown, you gotta figure some things out. They're on a 3 game losing streak, and you mentioned the penalty yardage today, from Friday. So, I mean, you just hope that that's. It sounds like it's a lot of easy mistakes to clean up.
Mhm.
So we talked. I mean, a month ago, I remember us talking on the show, like, Middletown's 3-0 in conference play. Like, is this real or is this legit? And so great win for Mason, and they play Coleraine next week, so definitely a chance for them to kind of improve in the conference as well. And I believe now versus when we were in high school, I think almost every team makes the playoffs now.
That's crazy.
Which so, but then seeding comes into play too,
Mhm.
big time. You're still jockeying for seeding throughout these next through 2-3 weeks. So these wins are gonna be big and matter, because that might be the difference between playing a Lakota West or a Moeller. And
Mhm.
that's everybody's going to try to avoid those top 5 teams in the area. So that's kind of my take on it. But
Yeah, definitely. You bring up a good point about the playoffs. I didn't even think about that. I know that changed a few years ago. Now that you mention it, but like you said, seeding's still important. And if you're Mason, you're putting yourself in a better position come the playoffs. And if you're Middletown, and don't get me wrong, I get Middletown and Hamilton mixed up all the time in my head
yeah,
because they're both. I don't know why I do, but I do. But it has been a little bit of a rough stretch for them. But you can you still put yourselves in a position with a good front half of your season to salvage something here at the end.
absolutely.
And I will definitely be keeping an eye on that Mason Coleraine game, because that's those 2 teams we just talked about. Coleraine building some momentum.
Yeah,
Even though it's a loss, and it's better than anything they've had the
for
rest
sure.
of the
Throughout the
season.
year,
So
yeah,
there's some momentum there, and then Mason's playing with a lot of house money right now, playing good, coming out with wins, playing decent football. So it'll be
yeah,
interesting to see that. All right, I will kick it back to Jacob, and he's going to talk about Harrison and Mount Healthy.
yeah. So Harrison and Mount Healthy featured one of our top 25 matchups from last week. So Mount Healthy last week we had ranked at 24, and they were sitting 5-1 before this game. And then Harrison is at 17. So Harrison's been having a great season this year, and I know we haven't talked about them much on this show, but they rolled past Mount Healthy, 49-26, jumped out to an early lead, 14-0 after the first quarter. Never really looked back after that. And, Mount Healthy put up 12 in the fourth quarter to make it a little bit more respectable, but you see a big play here. I'm assuming that's Josh Adelsberger for Harrison. He had 2 catches for 2 touchdowns. Yeah, so if you're Harrison's quarterback, Dickie Angle, you're loving your day right now. 3 completions, 6 attempts, 65 yards, 3 touchdowns.
That doesn't get much better than that.
It sounds like it was almost touchdown or bust every play. Like those 3 incompletions were probably just deep balls that didn't hit. And then Cole Coops has been Harrison's bell cow all year. He's been a terrific back for them. He had 17 carries, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then Coops this year also is leading the Southwest Ohio Conference in rushing yards with 134 attempts for 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns, still with 3 games left to play. So if you're looking at that if you're Cole Coops, you're pretty happy. You still have a chance to, maybe even get close to 1,500 yards and have a pretty tremendous season for a running back. So you got to give it up to Harrison because they've really just been rolling through their schedule. I mean, they're 6-1. They have a pretty crazy point differential at 288 to 115. Their last 3 weeks, so they beat Mount Healthy 49-26. They beat Campbell County 49-14, and they lost to Clinton Massey 21-17. So really big last couple of weeks to get 2 nice wins to get your confidence back because they also beat East Central earlier in the year. So a lot of people know East Central as being a really good squad over in Indiana. They won against them 35-28. So I think, Harrison has a very good chance to make some noise in the playoffs. They have some guys. I mean, when you have a running back that you can lean on like that, that can take a lot of carries and also be efficient with that workload, that gives you a lot of opportunity for success come November and December football. So I think if you're a Harrison fan, student, or player, you have to be feeling pretty good about getting that win over Mount Healthy. Especially, Mount Healthy was 5-1 going into that game. So was Harrison. So you got to think that game's going to swing kind of who's going to end up coming out on top in that conference. So big win for Harrison. And just want to shout out Cole Coops for the season he's having. He's been a great running back so far for them.
What first of all, great name. Cole Coops, that's a good one. Second of all, he's backing up the name hype by playing lights out from the tailback position. 1,000 yards at this point of the season is mighty impressive.
Yeah.
So that's definitely worth giving a shout out to him and his success this season. And, it seems like Harrison, even past that, they're definitely running the ball really well, but it seems like their offense is kind of firing on all cylinders, even if the passing game is big player bust. But if it's working, it's working. And you don't fix what isn't broken, right? So they continue to roll on, take it to Mount Healthy. And Jacob will talk about it more in his segment with the standings, but I'm sure they put themselves in a great position heading towards the playoffs.
Yeah.
At this point of the season. And then also I knew they beat East Central, but I forgot about that. That's a big
win. Yeah, I kind of forgot. I was looking back at their schedule today when I picked the game.
I don't know much about Clinton Massey, but that could be one of those situations, kind of like Moeller has. You lost to a team you're not normally used to playing.
Well,
maybe they play them all the time.
Another thing we have to remember too, I want to say, okay, no, never mind. The Clinton Massey wasn't the Hurricane game. That was the next week. That was the 28th. Okay. That was the 28th. I was gonna maybe put an excuse in there as like maybe the hurricane and all the rain played a part, but that was the next week.
Well, I mean, teams have off weeks. Sometimes the game just doesn't go your way, but it seems like they've just got a all around solid squad. and it comes through. It rolls through Danny Coons, Tri-State football name of the week, Cole Coops.
Nice, nice.
I don't know. I'm just kidding around. There's no such thing as the name of the week, but I do like that rolls off the tongue. All right, so I'll kind of parlay it back to myself here,
Yeah.
and I'm going to talk about Batavia and Wilmington. Wilmington, always has kept my attention because I think their logo's sick. But I digress. We talked briefly about Batavia a couple weeks ago when they caught our eye with that massive 83-0 win, and that kind of piqued my interest. And I've been keeping a pretty close eye on them since, and they're rolling. Batavia comes out on top in this conference matchup against a really good Wilmington squad. They roll 28-21. And it seems like, I don't know about you, Jacob, but it seems like these days we're talking a lot about the run game. It seems like teams have really leaned into the run game and are really pounding the rock to good success. And that kind of seems to be the overarching theme with at least the games we talk about.
There's only been one team that I would say is an exception, and that's Moeller.
Yes. And
other than that,
but I'll put a name in the hat. Batavia's passing game is quite impressive. They had 297 yards of passing on 53 attempts on Friday night. I know that
53 is a lot. That's
300 yards is 300 yards is not an uncommon number. It's high for high school, unless your name's Matt Ponatowski.
Yeah.
It's pretty high for high school football, right? But then you look at the number of attempts, 53 for their quarterback Carson Harris. He had 315 yards and 4 touchdowns on the night. I mean, there aren't a lot of offenses out there right now in the Tri-State that are throwing the ball that kind of way. No. I know we keep bringing up Moeller, but my point is that Batavia has found something that makes them really dangerous, and that is a high-flying offensive attack. Think of it this way: Batavia had 45 yards rushing on Friday night. That's it.
That's the offense I want to play in.
Yeah, right.
Wide receiver, you're getting the ball all the time.
It is go big or go home for Batavia on the offensive side of the ball, and in today's world, football landscape, that's the way the game's played in a lot of in college, and in the NFL. But you get to the high school level, and you see a lot of running. And I'm not taking anything away from the teams that can run the ball really well. I mean, we just talked about Cole Coops for 10 minutes, but this is impressive from Batavia, which is a squad. No one really talks about the Southern Buckeye Athletic Association. Right, it's kind of off in the distance, It's there, but we always talk about the GCL or the GMC. But you got a team that's operating at this kind of level at this point in the season. And Wilmington's not a bad squad either by any means. I mean, let me because I'll pull it up so I can fact check myself here. Yeah. But I mean, Batavia's rolling. They're 6-1, 2-0 in conference. Wilmington hasn't had much success in conference play, but they're playing high-powered offenses. Clinton Massey, we just talked about him a minute ago.
Massey's 5-2.
They're playing good football as well, and it looks like Wilmington's just run into 2 really good offenses through their first 2 weeks of the conference play, right? I mean, yeah, they played Clinton Massey and Batavia. Right.
I mean,
so not the best draw if you're Wilmington, but they're not a team that you can just roll over.
No, I mean they have a positive point differential.
Yeah, they're probably one of the better 3 and 4 teams I've seen on looking through the standings this year. So Batavia's playing great football. Carson Harris, that offense seems to roll through him. And then you look at something that popped out to me from Wilmington statistics. Shout out to Jake Stevens, Wilmington's quarterback. He also had 245 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he had a good night as well. So it was a good game for sure. But I noticed something in the box score, and it says under rushing for Wilmington, Jake Stevens, 6 attempts for minus 45 yards. That kind of, from the defensive side of the ball, it seems like Batavia's just dominating the trenches.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can't pull up.
I don't remember. Do they count sacks for like quarterbacks as negative rushing yards?
Yes, they do. So that would be why they had 7.5 sacks
That makes
on
sense. Yeah. So they
Wilmington
were
that
just it was
night.
a party in the backfield.
Yes, I mean, but even still, to Wilmington's credit, they managed to put up 21 points regardless,
Yeah.
and kept this game close towards till the very end. It was in the fourth quarter that Jake Stevens had an 80-yard touchdown pass. So I mean, they found success, but I tie this back to Batavia. The 83-0 score makes a little bit more sense now.
Yeah.
Now that I've realized that their passing attack is firing on all cylinders the way it is. In terms of their receiving for Batavia, it looks like Marcus Hubanks, who is a junior, and I believe Carson Harris is also a junior. So Batavia is set up really well for the next 2 years. Marcus Hubanks, 9 receptions for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. Max Melman, 9 receptions, 70 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. So there's your 4 touchdowns. And like I said, they had 45 yards rushing.
Yeah.
You don't get many offenses like that in high school football these days. And it's impressive when teams can do that. Batavia's put themselves in a great spot to make some noise this postseason. And it's good for Batavia as well because, like I talked about, it's not a high school or a program we talk about much.
Yeah.
And they're rolling. And I got to look at the schedule. I'm very, very interested in when Clinton Massey and Batavia play.
Oh, I'm on it right now. I just wanted to say a couple things. So Carson
Mm-hmm.
Harris is leading the Southern Buckeye Athletic and Academic Conference in passing at 2,352 yards. And then Marcus Hubanks, the junior you just mentioned, he's leading with 913 yards, and Max Melman's right behind him with 808. And then the third guy, Lucas Powell for Western Brown, is at 509. So their passing attack is operating at a different level compared to some of the other teams in their conference. So they play New Richmond next week, and then Clinton Massey 18th of October. So
keep your eye on that game. That'll be a
week
good one.
9. Week 9, that'll be a good game.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really boils down to the passing attack is quite simply impressive, and then also Batavia is just a school that you don't think about. So
Yeah,
great for the Bulldogs. Great, impressive that they're having this kind of season, and it looks like their key guys are going to be coming back.
yeah.
So they're set up for success here in the future.
Also, want to mention New Richmond is not a pushover either. They play
No.
New Richmond next week, who's 5-2. So Batavia's got a really good test these next 2 weeks to get ready for some playoff football. You play 2 5-2 squads. So I think that it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out.
I just pulled up. I did just pull up New Richmond's record because I frequent New Richmond quite a bit, and I wouldn't want to. It's kind of like Franklin. I always talk about Franklin. Those aren't some boys you want to mess with. I wouldn't want to mess with anybody from New Richmond either. But they did lose to Roger Bacon, which I find a little bit surprising. Close game 22 weeks ago. That might have been the Hurricane week. So maybe there's some more sense to that. And then they lost to Goshen, but they did just come out with a nice win over Western Brown. So yeah, that will also be a game definitely worth keeping an eye on next week. All right, that's all I have for that one. Do you want to throw it back? Do you want to throw it into?
Yeah, I'll take it over, and we can go into our conference standings and roll through these. So I will get my screen ready to share. Okay. Perfect. So, yeah, we'll start off in the GMC for this week. So, we're still Princeton. Now, West has the best overall record. So, if that stays the same, they will probably win the conference. However, looking at the schedule for this week, let's see. So, not sure if West and East. So West and East play each other week 9. That's a very, very big game.
Big games going on week 9.
Week 8, like this upcoming week in the GMC, we talked about Mason Colerain a little bit. Middletown Hamilton's another game that's important. Those are, two kind of all 4 of those teams kind of have something to prove. And I think Princeton has a little bit of something to prove against Fairfield too. Princeton kind of snuck out with a win against Oak Hills last week, 23-10. And they really haven't played their best football these last 2 weeks, as you can see. They were dominant. Not dominant, but they were finding ways to win throughout this stretch. I mean, especially beating West and East. Those are two really good wins there. So just a little bit of a slip up against Hamilton, but I think they'll have a really good finish to the season. And then just going back to review some of the games, if it lets me, there we go. So the other games that happened, I just touched on Princeton Oak Hills a little bit, and then Hamilton beat Fairfield 42-21. So Hamilton has come on really, really strong. They're on a 4-game win streak after starting 0-2 in the conference. And one of those wins is a 34-0 win against Princeton. So Hamilton definitely has a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. They've been playing really well as of late. And then also you look at the schedule down the stretch. If you're the Big Blue, you can't overlook any of these teams, but you're getting Coleraine and Sycamore, who have struggled this year in the GMC. So, could get another couple, 2, possibly 3 wins if you're looking at that for Hamilton. And that could make things really interesting with the West and East game too, because one of those teams is going to go to 2 losses. So just very curious to see how that shakes out, and especially like playoff standing wise, because I have a feeling some of these games down the stretch are going to be really crucial for how teams are seeded. So,
I think earlier I kept getting Hamilton and Middletown mixed up. I said I do that all the time, but yeah, I was thinking of Hamilton earlier when I was talking about that Mason Middletown game, because I know that I thought it was Middletown, but it's actually Hamilton that has come on really, really strong here, late in the season. And like you just said, can't overlook some of those schools, but favorable schedule for them coming into.
Yeah, you've already played all the big dogs in the GMC. You played the 3 teams ahead of you, and you got to win against Princeton. So that's a big win.
They will definitely be exciting to watch come playoff time, because they've proven they could beat some of the better teams in the city.
And that was a very convincing win against Princeton too, like 34-0. You were doing something really. You were doing something really well that game. But
they found their secret. You know what I mean? Weapon, right?
Secret sauce or
MJ, that's what I was going for.
MJ's secret stuff.
That's what I was going for. I couldn't spit it out, but that's what I was thinking of. Bugs Bunny's over on the sidelines at Hamilton with that bottle, man. They found something, but good for them, man.
So enough with me talking about the GMC, though, my hometown conference. But so we'll move on to the GCL South. Moeller just putting on a clinic this season, and they won the GCL outright this week with getting a 42-14 win over Elder. They're the only team in the conference that has played all of their conference games. However, 42-14 against. I know Elder's been battling injuries, but Ponatowski's day was impressive, going 19 for 22, 3 touchdowns. I think right now, player of the year watch is really between him and Justice Burnham. And at the end of this, I'll do a brief little comparison between the two and their stats, because they look very, very similar. I was looking earlier, and it's kind of crazy. So, but then Trinity in Kentucky ended up beating St. X with a baseball score of 7-3. So,
we had a few of those games this week, actually. There were 7-3 games.
And St. X, they always have such a tough strength of schedule. We've talked about it. Trinity and Louisville St. X are like those 2 Kentucky teams that are always just giving teams, some fits.
Cathedral in Indiana as well.
Yeah. And then LaSalle, I'm not very familiar with Ron
Cali, I think it is.
Yeah, Ron Cali. But LaSalle picks up 28-17 win against Ron Cali. And I know the LaSalle Elder game I'm covering that in week 10. So, none of these teams have had a bad season. LaSalle's 6-1, Moeller's 6-1, and then X and Elder at 4-3. But a lot of these losses for these teams have been against really tough competition. So you're really, I think if you're Elder, you're really hoping you can get somewhat healthy going into the playoffs and down the stretch here. If you're Moeller and LaSalle, you're just trying to keep doing what you've been doing. And I think if you're St. X, you're just hoping that the schedule eases up a little bit to kind of finish out the season and before you get into playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way as well. Look at the point differentials. All three, X, LaSalle, and Elder, are all very similar. And Moeller's kind of just taking on, they're in a league of their own. But I mean, despite being 4-3, St. X and Elder are not. Do you know what I mean?
They're not. Yeah, like their 4-3 is not what a normal 4-3 team looks like.
They're losing to good teams and good programs, and they're going to be tough in the playoffs like they always are. Like that'll be my takeaway from this: is do not discount the Bombers or the Panthers at all.
Oh no,
despite their record. Yeah. And like you said, Elders probably had the injury bug, probably at the worst time heading to the GCL play. But but if you take away Moeller and the Ponatowski Premier League, right? They're so tight. It's such a tight division, and
and I mean, I think if you're these other teams too, you're pretty upset that Ponatowski's only a junior. I guess I gotta see him all next year too.
It's like, hey, man, we finally got rid of Jordan Marshall, and here comes this Ponatowski kid, right?
Yeah. So that's about all I have for the GCL South. So I'm going to move on to the Cincinnati Hills League, where Wyoming and Indian Hill both still stand at 4-0. Wyoming has the undefeated season going right now at 7-0. Crazy point differential, they've outscored their opponents by almost 170 points. And then Indian Hill's not that far behind them at about 150. So really crazy point differentials, but Taylor also picking up a nice win against Finneytown down here, 40-14. Wyoming putting the beat down on Deer Park, 56-20. Indian Hill, 35-7, and Madeira winning against Marymount, 35-9. So as we've talked about with this, really the big game in this conference down the stretch here is going to be Wyoming, Indian Hill. One of those teams will end up losing and somebody will be victorious in this conference. I'm not sure who it is, though, because both teams have been having a really, really good year. And I know we've talked about it in previous shows, how Wyoming's been a powerhouse program kind of for the last 10 or 15 years. They've been really good. So just really curious if Indian Hill is going to be able to knock them off and maybe, win this conference this year. So, but yeah, Marymount plays Wyoming this week on Thursday. So a little Thursday night football for the Cincinnati Hills League for those interested or wondering. And then Indian Hill at Finneytown, Taylor at Madeira, Deer Park at Reading. So not really a ton of great games in this for this week, but yeah, go on with what you were going to say.
It's just really quick because you've hit the nail on the head with the CHL, between Indian Hill and Wyoming. But the one thing that has kind of jumped off the page to me there a little bit, and it maybe could be debunked, if you go look at it, who each team has played, but the point differential in conference play for Wyoming versus Indian Hill, very similar points for, but if you look at that points against for Indian Hill, just they're putting the clamps on the rest of the conference, and why Wyoming is too. It just seems like maybe Indian Hills' defense has just been a little bit more efficient. I mean, maybe they haven't had as hard of a schedule. I don't know.
I think they haven't had as hard of a schedule because I know Wyoming had already played Taylor, and that was a pretty good and close game. And it looks like Indian Hill's schedule is Wyoming and then Taylor. So if you're Indian Hill, you just need to get through this Finneytown week with a win. You can't look ahead, obviously, but
both home games, I believe, for Indian Hill there to end the season.
Yeah, it is. So that's big. That's very big for Indian Hill, getting a couple home games against two really good teams. And if anything, it'll prepare them for the playoffs. But they have the chance to write their own destiny to finish the year out, and win this conference. So that's about all I got on the CHL, not to be confused with DHL. And we are going to move to the ECC. So yeah, this is what I was looking at with Burnham, but I'll get back to the conference real quick. So yeah, all year Anderson, Winton Woods have reigned supreme. Both are 6-0 in conference, 7-0 overall. And then honestly, if you're Kings and you're West Claremont, it just sucks that you're in a conference with Anderson and Winton Woods, because they really are having a good season. I mean,
great years for those two schools.
I'm curious. I would assume their 2 losses are probably to both of those teams, which I'm going to check right now.
Yeah, Kings are both.
Yeah, so Winton Woods and Anderson, and then West Claremont lost to Anderson, and then lost to Kings. So Kings looks like they should be safe to be the 3rd team in this conference. Like, not sure who's going to win it between Anderson and Winton Woods, but Kings picking up that win against West Claremont is good for their standing. They'll be 3rd. And I mean, Kings has a solid squad. I watched them earlier this year.
They're a good team against Winton Woods.
Yeah, and like I said, it just sucks you're in this conference at this year where Anderson has just been a train that you cannot stop. I mean, overall, they've allowed 39 points through 7 games.
That's
less than a touchdown a game. So, I mean, it's pretty crazy. And then 362 points for. So
I just keep watching that every week, and I just keep seeing how high we can get it.
Yeah.
It just keeps getting higher and higher. And it's like, it's kind of one of those situations, right? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut. You're like sitting there, you're like, oh, when's the shoe going to drop? At this point, the other shoe going to drop. At this point, I don't think it's going to drop. I mean, they are just steamrolling everybody in their path. I mean, leaving nothing in their wake. That Winton Woods game, that's going to pop up on our weekly picks, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to have to think long and hard about that one.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one to choose. It's going to be a hard one to call because, Winton Woods, you look at their schedule a little bit too. I didn't mean to click on the game, just the team. But I mean, they've been rolling recently. I mean, since they really haven't had a close game either. So it'll be good for both of these teams to get a test before the playoffs. Mm-hmm. I've kind of spoken to that throughout the year, where it almost just feels like both of these teams are just a clear level ahead of, and this is not a knock on any of the other teams in the ECC, but you just got to kind of call it how you see it. Where when you see the stats like this, I mean, both of these teams are playing really good football. So very, very interested in that matchup between them.
If I'm Evan Dreyer, I'm getting that tattooed on me at the end of the year. I'm just putting that out there, that point differential. Just so you can say I coached that team.
Yeah.
Have it with you for the rest of your life.
Right. And then I'll try to speed this up because we're already getting close to an hour. We apologize for that. But so we're going to move on to the MVC, as they have last week they've finally moved into conference play, or 2 weeks ago. Last week, so you kind of see CHCA, Roger Bacon in the Scarlet side moving to 2-0, and then St. Bernard Elmwood Place and Cincinnati Country Day are 2-0 in the gray side. So one thing I want to point out right here, Roger Bacon's point differential through 2 games, 83-2.
They've given
so their defense still has not allowed a point yet. It was just a safety. So
a safety to Summit Country Day. That's it.
Yeah. So and talk about the flip side there. It's just a rough.
Well, at least they've only played 1 game, right?
Yeah. They've only played 1 game. But yeah, so if you're Roger Bacon, I know we brought them up earlier in the year. I think they had what game was that?
McNick,
Yeah, it
probably.
was the McNick game. So doing a really good job of bouncing back after that McNick loss. Having a couple tough losses at Hughes and at McNick or
They
at home
kept it
versus
close against
McNick.
Indian Hill week 1 too, I believe.
Yeah,
I
they did right
remember that game
there.
being coming across my desk.
Yeah, and especially with how Indian Hills looked kind of as the years gone on too. They've looked really solid. So definitely, if you're Roger Bacon, you're feeling better about how you've been playing, and they have a really big matchup next week. This is one you got to highlight. CHCA and Roger Bacon are playing each other, two early favorites for the conference. So, who's going to prevail? That will be fun to watch. But
St. Bernard Elmwood Place has a good conference, point differential as well. So
yeah, and they're also 6-1. So CHCA and St. Bernard Elmwood Place are the only 6-1 teams in the NBC. And this is where, like I said, for Roger Bacon, this would be a big win to get, just to get a little bit closer to maybe taking that side of the conference and being, the conference champ. So, but so that's about all I have for this conference. So I'm going to move to the GCL co-ed. And so you see down here, Chaminade Julienne getting a 48-14 win over Fenwick. And then McNick Alter with the other 7-3 game this week. And big win for McNick. We kind of went through it last week with how in previous years Baden has kind of ran this conference. But if you're at McNick right now, you're 6-1. You just picked up a gritty, grinded out, not a lot of scoring game. You just got to find a way to keep winning because I think they can really end up winning this conference this year, which would be the first time in, I think, 4 or 5 years that another team other than Alter or Baden's won. So big win against Alter. And then looking forward to this week, Baden plays Alter and Fenwick plays McNick. So big game for Baden and Alter. I mean, if you're Alter, you just came off a rough loss where you only put up 3 points. And, when you look and the other team only has 7 too, I know if you're an offense, you're just kicking yourself after that type of a performance where you're like, we left some stuff on the table. So I think if you're Alter, it's no need to panic. But you have a big game against Baden this week to kind of make up some ground in the conference. And so that will take me to the SWAC, which is a small conference, only 4 teams. But Harrison, we talked about them earlier, having a really good season, 6-1, getting the win over Mount Healthy, and then Talawanda getting the 34-24 win over Northwest. So won't be too many more conference games, though. Only a couple more. So looking forward, okay, I've never heard of Dayton Ponitz.
Neither have I.
So hopefully Northwest can get a win up there. And then Talawanda at Harrison would be a good game for Harrison and Talawanda. I mean, they're both 1-0 in conference. And, yeah, Harrison has the much better overall record. But if you're Talawanda, I mean,
what you got to lose?
Sure. Yeah, right. I mean, and this is – you only have one more game in the conference after this, too. So if you beat Harrison, you put yourself in a pretty good position to win or 3-way tie. So, that might be a game to watch. We'll see how Harrison does against them if they just keep leaning on that ground game and they just run all over them. But on that note, I'm going to move to the Southern Buckeye Athletic Academic Conference. Messes me up that it's athletic and academic. The only conference that puts an emphasis on the academic. But we talked about Batavia in the season they're having 2-0, Clinton Massey 2-0, and 5-2, which Clinton Massey is the only team that beat Harrison this year too. So
Williamsburg having a good year as well on the national side.
Oh yeah, and I mean if you're looking at the American side, you're talking. I mean you got a 6-1 team, 5-2 team, 5-2 team. So they definitely have some talent there, you know. And then like you said too, Williamsburg at 6-1, 2-0 in their side of the conference. They're on a 5-game win streak. So I think if you're Williamsburg, you're really hoping to kind of run away with that conference title. And then if you're Batavia, Clinton Massey, and New Richmond, you know it's going to be a dogfight. Every game matters down the stretch. You have to win all of these games if you want the conference championship. So it will be an exciting finish looking at the schedule for this week. We talked about Batavia and New Richmond playing. That'll be a really good game. And then Williamsburg is playing East Clinton, who should be a very easy win for Williamsburg, just basing it off a record, 6-1 versus a 1-6 team. And then the final conference we're going to touch on here is the Cincinnati Metro Athletic Conference. And so you see Schroeder getting a 60-0 win over Gamble Montessori. So good win for Schroeder. And on the blue side of the standings, they move to 1-0, and Gamble moves to 0-1.
16 points for Gamble all season.
Man, that's rough.
Woodward might be worse. They have 6 points all season. And I am not talking ill will on either one of these.
No, I'm just thinking. I'm feeling for the players with those size. Like I'm thinking about being a player for those schools, and I really feel for them, and I really hope for those two programs that at least next year, for some of the guys who are on the squad, they can turn it around a little bit and have some more success, because that's not fun for them. So, But yeah, you're looking like Aiken and Taft in the red side have the best chance to, kind of take over and take control of that conference, that side of the conference. But we'll have to see. I mean, Withrow's 1-0 in conference play, but they're 1-5 overall.
We talked about that last week. I think it's still wrong.
Like,
maybe it's not.
I don't know. They didn't report the score from the Woodward game. So.
I think who knows.
Yeah. It's so we'll come back to this at some point. But and then the last thing I want to do real quick, briefly before I'll be done with this, I just want to pull up Justice Burnham stats and then Ponatowski's stats as well, because looking at the way these two guys have commanded these offenses throughout the year, me personally, they would be up in the top two. They would be my top two for player of the year for our tri-state. And I know I don't vote on that, but I just kind of wanted to state my opinion with the numbers they're having. So, I mean, Ponatowski completing 70% of his passes, 280 yards a game. So he's got almost 2,000 through 7 games, 25 touchdowns, 2 picks, and then not much going on the ground, but doesn't really need to. And then Justice Burnham, 2,000 yards passing, almost 300 a game, 25 touchdowns, 2 picks, which is the exact same as Ponatowski, but then adds 5 rushing touchdowns on the ground. So when I was saying they had almost identical stats, I was being serious. 75, same exact for touchdowns and interceptions, passing, and then completion percentage and yards are not very far off. But Burnham, I mean, completing 75% of your passes is crazy. I mean, last week against Turpin, he went 20 for 21. I mean,
hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, you're one away from literal perfection that game. 380 yards, 4 touchdowns. So just kind of wanted to highlight, since I've been going through these conferences through these weeks, just kind of the guys who've stood out. These two guys have been just awesome football players and have led their teams to Anderson 7-0, Moeller 6-1. So got to tip your caps to these guys, and they'll be very fun to watch come playoff time.
Well, we have made it almost officially an hour, so I think maybe we should end it here.
Yeah.
Some great conversations tonight about some good football teams, some teams we haven't talked about much, some teams we've talked about a lot, and some good conference play as we roll into the back end of the season and then off into the playoffs we go. We will be back again next Monday night, and I'm assuming we'll be through the rest of the season through the playoffs. So always
Yeah,
keep an
I
eye
think
out.
we are going through the playoffs. So
Make sure to keep an eye out for us every Monday night, and we'll catch you next time.
Yep.
See you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.